Today on the show, a rural pastor that didn't think he had enough time for social media.
The solution? 2 simple adjustments that freed up the time he needed.
This episode is full of introductory and advanced social media advice for churches.
And specifically, if you're a smaller church or serving in a rural area, this one's for you.
Let's dive in! Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him Reverend Rural. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello, hello.
And today, Reverend Rural is taking the lead on this episode. As many listeners and viewers may know, Alex is a bivocational pastor. He works here at Pro Church Tools, Inc. full-time, but he also serves in his local rural congregation. And we wanted to give him space to talk about how he handles social media in particular. Because for a long time, he didn't think he had enough time to do social. And yet, from what I understand, which is very little, which is why I should hand it over to him now, he's taken the principles that we talk about so frequently on the show and expressed them in ways that are sincere to his local body. So, Reverend Rural, take it away.
Well, you did a good job of setting me up, but let me give even a little more context. So I've been working here. We were just half a minute ago before we started recording talking about the history of this company. Pro Church Tools has been around for 10 years. I've been on board for 7 of those years, which now just in reflection feels like a long time. Like being here for 7 years feels like significant. And I've been a rural, local, small church pastor. I use the word small in the sense that we're about 65, 75 people, which we know is the average church size in America, and we'll talk about that later on in the episode. But I've been a pastor of that church for the entire time, and the idea for this episode was spurred by a conversation that I had just last weekend at a party. And it's not the first time I've had this conversation. So I'm at this party, and there's another local church pastor who's at that party. I know him really well. I know him really well in the sense that we see each other at these kinds of events, but we don't hang out. But he's a really good guy, really good pastor, and he pastors a larger church than mine, and he follows Pro Church Tools and has for a while. We were talking about church. I asked him how church is going. We're going back and forth. And he said, "Oh, I've been listening to your podcast." And anytime anyone I know says that to me, I'm like, "Please don't. You don't have to do this." He's like, "No, I really enjoy it." And he said, "But I want to ask you, how do you reconcile what you guys talk about on the show with your actual ministry in your church?" Because he knows the type of church that I pastor. He knows the type of rural area that we pastor in. And he knows that a lot of the tips and tactics that we talk about on this show are relevant to some types of churches, but not all types of churches. And for anyone who has followed my church in any way, shape, or form, especially on social in the last few years, they've probably felt that tension as well. Okay, Alex talks a lot about this stuff on the show, but I'm looking at his Instagram and it's not telling the same story. So what's going on here? We've never had good social strategies at our church, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram. We have a really thriving Facebook group, which I've mentioned a few times on the show, and I'd be happy to talk about at length some other time, not on this show today. But publicly, our public Facebook page and our public Instagram page, we've never put a lot of effort towards, and they've never been good means for ministry. And then a few years ago, we go through this global disruption where COVID-19 kind of shakes up what all of us were doing in our churches. And we had to reevaluate our relationship as a church with a lot of what we were doing as a church, and one of them was social media. At that time, we weren't meeting in person, and so we were just streaming our services on Facebook and Instagram, but that's the only thing we're using Facebook and Instagram for. And then we regathered a couple years later, and in our little church, we kind of stripped everything back. And we didn't want to overwhelm ourselves with regathering and remembering. We wanted to take it slow and steady. And for that reason, for the last 2 or so years since we've been back in person, our social accounts, Facebook and Instagram, have been pretty silent. We haven't posted anything because we were just trying to take care of ourselves during that time. Regather, remember, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And so we took some time off social. And I've alluded to that on this show. But recently, in the last handful of months, I have started to take my own advice, take your own advice from the show, and put some of these tips and tactics, these strategies that we talk about on this show for using social as a means for ministry into action. Because I had been believing the lie, I guess, that I didn't have time to do this, to do ministry online because my ministry in person feels like it speaks for all the ministry bandwidth that I have. And I wanted to share the story on this show because we know that the average church size in America is about 65 people. And so my story, the complexion of my community in the sense of the size of it, the resources we have, is not the minority. It's actually the majority. Like most churches are in the situation. And so surely there are plenty of people in our audience who are pastoring or serving in a church and just feel that tension like, I don't have the time to do this. Or for me, someone who's like really prone to do things with excellence is I don't have the time to do this well or excellently, so I'm not going to do it at all. And so what I did is I kind of regathered and I set out this strategy for myself for a way to use social as a ministry, but in a way that is sustainable. Because we talk about this as the social ministry mountain. This is your framework. If you think about social ministry as a mountain, the bottom part of the mountain, the foundational piece is no weeks off. And so that doesn't mean no days off. That's unreasonable and in a lot of ways nowadays unnecessary. But taking no weeks off from posting on social so that you don't lose any momentum that you are set out to gain by choosing to post on social. And so I knew if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to start posting on Instagram, which I felt like, we've got to start doing this. I knew I had to do it in a way that set us up for success and sustainability to be able to take no weeks off. And so I've got this two-pronged approach for achieving that, which is to repurpose high-quality content that's already being created and then to leverage low-effort design tools and templates.
I think when you said, I believed it had to be great or else not do it at all, was the thing that struck me the most. Because I feel like I am prone to that same type of thinking.
Yeah.
No, not prone. I feel like that is core to my being. Like, if it is not great, then I am worthless, is the common refrain my dark self-conscious will tell myself.
Yeah.
So how did you begin to like break through that, especially for folks that pride ourselves in having high standards, but then the frustration of not being able to like fulfill those?
Yeah. So the thing that broke the dam for me there was Canva. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. That's one of the low effort design tools.
Was it when you watched their Canva Create live conference and they did their like rap battle from stage?
It's actually really good for them that I was a Canva user before that.
Because I canceled, yeah.
If I wasn't yet a Canva user, if I saw that debauchery, I would have said, I'm never going to be using this platform at all. But I started using back last quarter of last year. I wrote this Advent devotional for our church.
Yes.
And I designed it using Canva. So I bought an ebook template off of Etsy for like $7. It's a Canva template. Opened it in Canva and it was gorgeous. And all I had to do was put in my devotional content. And now all of a sudden I've created this devotional that not only is rich in content, but like rich in aesthetics. And that experience working with Canva unlocked this strategy for me because I realized, and I'm someone who's like very proficient at graphic design.
I was going to say like,
yeah, like
you
really
have those skills.
Totally. Really proficient with Photoshop and Illustrator and have designed like hundreds of social posts for other churches. Like I'm really good at it, but it takes a lot of creative energy for me. It takes time. And that was part of the roadblock for me. It was like, yeah, I've got the high quality content already. And that's where we'll start. Like the high quality content already exists, but I'm not sure I have the bandwidth to like come up with really great designs every week. And so learning how to use Canva and seeing like, there's really low effort design tools available now. And I've got a handful of examples that can yield really high quality results. And I already have the high quality content. I can leverage this. I can set my design pride aside and not need to like set my ego aside and not need to be like, yeah, I designed that from scratch. That looks awesome. But like let Canva do the heavy lifting for me and bring my high quality content. And now all of a sudden I've got a social strategy that feels sustainable because I can create a post in Canva off a template in like 30 seconds. Whereas if I were to sit down with a blank canvas or a blank artboard on Photoshop, I could come up with something that looks just as good or maybe even better, but it's going to take me 30 minutes. Depending on my creative energy levels, it might take me 60 minutes. And that's what I've learned I didn't have the bandwidth for. Now, in a local church, a small local church like mine, I do believe, so I'm the pastor, right? And so I can hear a little bit of objection from pastors listening, saying like, right, but like, I don't want to be doing this work myself. Like maybe there's someone in our community or there's nobody in our community who can do this. And in our community, I've discerned that like, it is me. There are creatives in our community. We have really creative photographers, really creative, like folks who run the visual stuff at church, really creative musicians. But when it comes to like visual design, I actually am the guy. And so that's why it fell on my plate. And I'm okay with that because I've mined out a strategy to like make it work sustainably.
Right. So it sounds like you identified the roadblocks. Here's why this isn't being done. There was a, psychological element of I want these standards to be fulfilled, but I don't have the time. So how do I reconcile those two things? Then you come up with a solution for that, which is repurposing the high quality content that's already been created, leveraging low effort design tools. So now you have an answer to this psychological block. And then you had to consider like, well, who's the right person to do that? And then once you identified that it was you in this case, and for those listening in your church, it might not be you, but it might be you if you have those pre-existing skills. Then you're like, okay, I feel like I've set the table for going forward. Now, I don't know if you mentioned this. Do you want to share your Instagram handle, Facebook handle for those that do want to check out like what you're doing, your church's website?
Yeah. So the website is lifeabundant.info. The Instagram is instagram.com/lifeabundantniagara. And I'm actually we're going to show 5 post examples that I've posted recently. So you get to see them if you're watching this show on YouTube. But if you're just listening, those links will be in the show notes as well.
And if you're listening in the future, you can go to Alex's Instagram and basically figure out if what we were talking about here was sustainable.
Yes.
The whole idea, no weeks off. Was it all a crock? And if you see, oh, wow, he hasn't published either something terrible happened, or you don't have to keep listening to this episode.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to get into it? You want to talk about the high quality content and the lower effort design tools?
I'd prefer if you talk about it and I sit here and listen. I'm really enjoying this kind of like inverted setup here.
Well, let's do it. And to the high quality content, this is something for longtime listeners of our show is not something you'll be hearing for the first time. This is something we talk about often, about how at your church, there's this high quality piece of long form content being produced every single week in the form of a sermon. So in a lot of circumstances for social, that looks like grabbing your sermon audio and sermon video, finding a hook, chopping it up into a 30 or 60 second short form video and posting it on social. That's a really great social strategy for repurposing that high quality content that already exists. And that takes the burden off of the folks who are responsible for social media, whether it's a volunteer or a staff member or a pastor. You don't have to come up with original content every time you sit down to post because you know you need to post. And you know it has to be more than just an advertisement for whatever's coming up next at your church. It has to be high quality, transformative, like content that really provokes spiritual formation. That really takes the burden off you. Is like, you don't have to come up with the content that's already being created at your church every single week. So the high quality content that's already existing that I'm leveraging, the first thing that comes to mind is sermon quotes. And so when I'm preaching, I know what pieces of that sermon, it's easy for me. I know what pieces to pull and what would translate good to a social post for later in the week. And I love this strategy because the sermon quote, if you pull it out in a thoughtful way, in a clear and concise way, a short way, works really well as a standalone piece of content. It can be very encouraging. It can funnel folks to a next step. It can be a good piece of content on its own. But for folks who are in the room on Sunday, it also serves as like a callback because it's not reasonable for me to expect that you have ingested everything I say in a 20, 30, 40-minute sermon to the point where it's going to form and shape your life. But if you were in the room and something really spoke to you, maybe you didn't write it down, maybe your kid was restless during the sermon or what have you, when it hits you again on Tuesday afternoon when you're scrolling on Instagram or again on Thursday morning, that then becomes like this formative piece of content that doesn't exist just in one place at one time, but can occur throughout where people choose to show up, which is on social media throughout the week. So sermon quotes is something that I'm pulling out of my own sermons and I preach every other week. So every week that I'm not preaching, I've got my little notebook out when the other teacher is preaching. And when things stand out to me, I literally just write them down or I'll type them down on my phone, knowing that I'm going to need a sermon quote to post later on in the week. These types of posts, these types of content also occurs when like outside of a sermon, if something else happens in the service, a moment in the service that is notable, whether it's like a prayer point or a story that was shared on stage, something that happens during that Sunday morning service, I'm always thinking now, I've got my antenna up. Oh, do I need to record this for a social media post later in the week? So it's just a mindset of previously, this wasn't on my radar, I wasn't thinking about it. But now that I've got this switch flipped, I just have this little antenna up, and when things are happening on a Sunday, I just take my phone out, I write them down, knowing that later in the week, I'm going to need something in the post. I can look back and call people back to something that happened when we were gathered together for worship.
I want to interject at that point because in my experience with the creative process, that type of rhythm and habit is really the make or break for your ability to achieve indefinitely that no weeks off rhythm. So for example, I sat down this morning at my blank cursor at 6 a.m. to start writing. And I cursed at my cursor repeatedly because I had nothing to give. Yeah. And a big part of that is because I'm not going on my daily walks right now every single day because like my leg has been like just acting up. By the time people hear this, they'll know. But I have an MRI on my knee next week.
Okay.
Because I got a second opinion from another doctor. Look at me hijacking this episode. I will hijack an episode.
That's fine, yeah.
And because my existing physio was like, look, ma'am, I don't really know what's wrong with this knee. Like, it doesn't seem like there's anything structured. So I talked to this other doctor who had worked with, she'd been a physio doctor or a doctor on a like professional rugby team for a long time. She's like, I don't know, man, that kind of sounds like a meniscus injury. I was like, a meniscus injury? I'm not in the NBA playoffs. Player. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, did you play like basketball as a kid? I was like, yeah. She's like, sometimes these meniscus tears, like, about like 20% of people have some type of meniscus like injury, but like you only feel it when your leg is like not balanced. So if you're like weight bearing and you're past 90 on one leg, which is the only time I feel this discomfort, you're probably not like perfectly aligned. And that's when, if there was a meniscus compromise, you'd feel it. And I was like, okay. So I go back to my other physio and I tell him this theory. And he's like, I think that's a pretty good theory. Yeah. And he's like, just go get an MRI and then we'll know. Because there's no way of knowing until we get imaging done. And x-rays, ultrasounds, they won't do it. You need an MRI. He's like, but don't worry, surgery is real quick. And I was like, surgery?
Jeez.
He's like, yeah, like just a quick little knee thing. They'll trim it because like it can't be so bad. So goes his thesis. Because like I'm walking and I'm fine. I'm only feeling one thing. Anyway, I haven't been going on my walks. Yeah. And I've realized that apparently all my good ideas come from my walks. Because I was sitting down in front of this cursor and I had nothing in my brainstorm bank.
Right.
And what you're describing here is that version of this.
Yes.
If you sit down and expect to come up with ideas in the moment, it's really challenging.
Yes.
So what I spent my whole entire morning doing was basically brainstorming ideas, not writing the posts, not creating the post, not designing or publishing the post, just coming up with ideas. Yeah. And now tomorrow I have to sit down and do the work. So now I'm a day behind. Why? Because I can't walk, but that's not my fault.
Yeah.
If you're doing what Alex is describing here, this is how it always goes. If an idea comes to you, you have to log it. You will not remember it. You cannot trust yourself with all the responsibilities that you oversee to remember the idea, or at the very least, remember the idea in the way it felt in the moment. Sometimes an idea feels great. You revisit, you're like, I don't know what I was thinking.
Yes.
And so write it down, so that when you're trying to achieve this no weeks off rhythm indefinitely in the future, you always have something to go from. It is very rare for me to look in that bank and be empty. Yeah. And I hate it today, and I was so frustrated because it's so much more challenging when you come from that place.
Yeah. I mean, I employ this strategy in my sermon writing. So I have a notebook in my phone called Story Log. And anytime something happens in my life that seems like it could be a sermon illustration, I write it down. So I've got this note of like a bajillion tiny little stories. Because I'll know, this exact same thing. Like I know, I'm every other week I need to sit down and write a sermon, and the best way to communicate the truths of the kingdom of God is through storytelling. So these little tiny little parables or stories are really helpful to me. If I had to sit down with a blank canvas every other week and try and remember something, recall something from memory, I wouldn't stand a chance. So I do the same thing there as well.
Feel free to use my meniscus injury.
Yes, I will.
Because I feel like it lines nicely with that scripture. It's like, be careful that you're on the straight and narrow because otherwise you might be slipping, right?
That's right.
Like my knee and shin bone were apparently not in perfect alignment.
Yes.
And now here I am. And you might need spiritual surgery today. And if you'll come to the front right now, we're going to lay hands on you
and you won't need to get surgery because you'll get healed.
Oh, please.
Okay, here's some low-hanging fruit. So I talked about quotes that pop up from the sermon, moments in the service. Here's the lowest hanging fruit, the scripture that was the point of the service on Sunday. So we preached from the Common Lectionary. So this past Sunday, I knew that the psalm was Psalm 139. So on Saturday, I posted just like a text graphic with part of the text on the graphic was, "You created my innermost being." And then I put that passage of Psalm 139 in the caption. So that's just like a little primer for the folks who belong to our church. They're going to see that, so that on Sunday, when they hear that psalm and it's the context for the sermon, they've already been primed, like, they're already in that headspace. And then on the inverse, you can do it again. So if the scripture is, I don't know, John 3:16 or whatever, you don't have to post it on the Saturday before, you can post it on the Monday after. So you don't have to go searching for that content at all. It's just there. If you belong to a church like mine or any church that looks similar to ours, you have a base scripture for that Sunday that you're kind of working through. And so you don't have to do any work. Like, the scripture's there for you. Take it and put it into Canva, which we'll get to in a moment, and post it. Here's one of our best performers. Images from children's church. Okay, so depending on the size of your church and your privacy and your policy, like, you may have to work through some policy stuff here with posting images of kids. And actually, the posts that are coming to mind right now, they're not even pictures of kids. They're pictures from our kids' church area of the stuff that kids have been doing in kids' church. And I'm not working for these posts at all. Our children's pastors are like taking these pictures and like sending it to me by like, "Oh, look at how cute this little painting is," or they'll post it to our Facebook group. And I see it, and I'm like, this is great. Like, they're praying through Psalm 20, the 23rd Psalm. And so they're breaking it all down, and our kids pastor posted a picture of the chalkboard on our Facebook group. It's like, I'm taking that and I'm posting that on Instagram, because you know what people love? People love to see what kids are doing in children's church. And so that's like a gold mine for me. If I ever need a post to just celebrate something that's going on at our church, something that's going on in the kids ministry is something I'm really always eager to share. The other day, I think it's one of the examples we are going to show, maybe not, is this picture of the Good Shepherd. They're working through the 23rd Psalm, and one of the kids painted the face of the sheep and the face of the shepherd as a rainbow, and both rainbows. And our kids pastor posted about that and just shared a little story about like, wow, how meaningful is this, that like they see their face reflected in the face of the shepherd. It's like, I'm posting that to Instagram, and I'm posting that so hard because that is so cool, and a part of our church that on social sometimes gets a little bit overlooked. And those kids are always doing fun, cute, little crazy crafts in there. So regardless of what kind of church you go to, if you've got kids, there's some content rich for posting to social in there. Like I said, be mindful of privacy and your policies. And we've talked about this on our show before, how to write up a policy for taking photos and posting photos of kids. But yeah, man, the kids' church, like, it's gold.
And if you're doing the aftermath, that's not a photo release form that you need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't, I mean, again, we don't, we've talked about AI mining the creative work of others. And yes, Alex is repurposing the creative work of children for his own, church's financial gain,
That's
clearly.
right. That's right.
But you don't have to get the photo release form from those parents. And you get a sense, though, still of like what kids ministry is like when you see that from the social feed.
Yeah. The last piece of high quality content that already exists, before we get on to like the low effort design tools, is just sharing stories about stuff that's going on in your community. And I know that sounds so elementary or basic, but it's true. We have this tendency on social media in our churches to post static imagery and invitation to like events that we're doing and stuff we're raising money for. And that stuff is important. But on social, that's not the content archetype that really resonates with people. And so we've talked about this before on the show just recently, the post I did about our church getting beehives. So there's a couple ways I could have gone about posting the same piece of content on social. I could have snagged a picture of a beehive and then told the story in the caption. Or I could have done what I did, which is take out my phone and record, turn it into like a bit of a parable, a bit of a story, use a little bit of a storytelling technique, and not with any like high quality camera or anything, literally just my phone. I edited it. I shot it in Instagram and edited it in the Instagram Reel editor, like no third-party software or anything. And that story, like I mentioned on a show recently, is our best performing social post of all time. So like those little stories of things your church is up to, they're happening all the time in your community. And so don't overlook them in an effort to like promote the things you're doing, but you can talk about the things you're doing, but in a way that feels like a story. And that is going to translate into really high quality content.
I was speaking at a conference this weekend, and I'm doing, you do it after a conference. You're talking to people that come up to you to ask questions. And this guy came up to me and he's like, man, like I follow your work. He's like, I'm trying to put into place all of your like rules. He's like, but now I have no place left to actually do any promotion. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, what are your rules for that? I was like, well, there are two things. I call them sprint promotions and smuggle promotions. And he's like looking a bit baffled. And I was like, you didn't catch that video. Okay, good. You didn't see everything. Yes. I was like, a sprint promotion is when you just throw all the rules aside for like a week. You're like, look, it's Christmas. We're going to promote this and we're going to bother you, but only for a week.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to reset. You can't do too much damage if it's just 1 week. Smuggle promotions are the way of doing this kind of thing indefinitely. And the smuggle promotion is what Alex is describing here, where he's talking about something the church is doing, but he's not promoting it. Mm-hmm. He's not saying like, and we need you to help us, like, install the beehive. So put your phobias aside and put your masks on. Right. Like, it's not that. It's just telling the story of what's happening. A smuggle promotion is when the post itself is valuable, and then you smuggle in a little promo at the very, very end, so that it doesn't detract from the value of the post. The reason we have rules like the 1 in 5 rule and the 50% rule, the 1 in 5 rule, no more than 1 out of every 5 posts should be promotional in nature. The 50% rule, if a post doesn't apply to at least half the audience, it's not worth sharing on a public forum. The reason we have these is to protect ourselves from ourselves, because the algorithm is looking at positive signals. And if we create content that is irrelevant to people, meaning it's either not valuable to them or it doesn't apply to them, those posts will not generate positive signals. Yeah. When our posts repeatedly don't generate positive signals, the algorithm does not prefer our content. It does not index our content. It is not sharing our content with people. This is not the previous era of social where people choose to follow you and 100% of your feed is people you choose to follow. About half of your feed is people you choose to follow. Half is random. Yeah. And if your content is not valuable, you're not going to show up on that real estate for people that don't follow you or people that follow you. So these rules have to be followed. Otherwise, your content will reach nobody. So go ahead, promote all you want. No one's going to see it. The other rule that we have, repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test. Alex's church published their greatest social post of all time. Was that a type of post that he had done before? No. It was a brand new type of thing. It is now his responsibility to repeat the best.
That's right.
I call this a callback. It is one of the most important elements of developing like a stand-up comedy routine. The joke is funny. You reference the joke 10 minutes later, it's funnier because there's shared language and a shared moment that you're now building upon. The same is true for social. One of our fellow employees is having an issue in his backyard right now. His issue is with the free-roaming animals that are destroying his gardens. Yeah. I wouldn't consider this person especially active on social media, but in his stories over the past couple of weeks, he has been taking his followers on the journey of him trying to stop these animals whom he respects and wants to live a thriving life, but not detract from the garden that he is trying to grow. And because it's a story that he's telling over weeks now, every time he publishes, it shows up on my feed. This callback element of social is something that I've just begun to kind of like pull the thread at a bit more, but it is so powerful. And so Alex and his church should be telling the entire story of this beehive. Like if I don't see the installation, if I don't see like, oh, we got the hives today. If I don't see him going like, oh, the hives made honey. Like I don't know anything about what he's going to show me, but he should be going to it again and again and again because it's proven to work. It already was the greatest post of all time. That's not going to happen every time for your church. But if you can call back the same themes and a story gets told over time and not in a single post, now we're getting into really powerful social strategy where you are basically installing yourself as a fixture in someone's feed. It does not matter what Rylan posts next. I am going to see it even if it's a departure from his gopher problems because I viewed all of his posts because I viewed the first one and then Instagram was like, oh, he's doing the gopher thing again. Let's show him the second one. And it kept showing up. The callback, tell these stories over time. I can't say enough about the value of like the storytelling feature. Like your church has VBS coming up. What are you going to do? Join us for VBS. No, don't even do that. Just show me like, oh, we're preparing for VBS. Today we got like the signage, or today we got to go buy Bristol board because we need signs to do this fun crap. Like just show me that. Now VBS is on my mind. Now, when you promote it from a stage announcement 2 weeks from now, and I've seen 3 of these reels, it's actually so much more compelling because I've seen behind the scenes, it's top of mind. You incepted me with a smuggle promotion because you weren't just being like, sign up for this thing. Now I actually have context for it. I'm more bought in. I'm more likely to respond.
And we've heard the objections to using social this way, which is like, well, how does this translate to like what we're doing in person? I'll tell you exactly how, is that when Ryland walked into the office this morning, the first thing I said to him is, did you have any gopher invasions last night? Like the thing that's happening online translates, it crosses over into interpersonal relationships. So yeah, that's gophers, that's in the office, that is what it is. But it's so true with the stories you tell on social.
They're gonna ask you in the lobby, oh, I saw you get the Bristol board from VBS.
Exactly, or the bees. And it's like, and on our Sunday service, when we're there to worship God, like when the lights are on and the mics are on, we're not talking about the bees every Sunday, but I can talk about the bees every week on social. Like I can. And those touch points, those conversations will translate, they'll cross over into interpersonal relationships. Now, all of a sudden, the whole church is bought in on the idea of the bees, and we haven't spent very much time talking about it from the stage at all. And that's the power of social, because it's a means for communication. Like we have folks in their butts in seats for 1 hour a week, if that. There are these 167 other hours where for a lot of those hours, people are on social media, whether we would prefer them to be or not. They just are. And so it's to our benefit that we use these digital means of communication to continue the conversation, continue the ministry, the work we're doing in our churches on these digital spaces, so that because it will cross over, it'll translate into interpersonal relationship and like physical and spiritual formation of folks in your community.
I want everyone to start thinking about, what are we promoting this summer, this fall? Depending on when you're listening to this episode, this season. What are kind of the big cornerstone events that you want as many people in your church to get involved in? Maybe it's small groups launch. Maybe it's VBS. Maybe it's, back to school. Maybe it's like get, more volunteers. Whatever it is, think about it. And then think about when you want to first make that announcement and how many weeks you want to do it for. All right, we want to make this announcement for 4 weeks over the month of August. Okay, in June and July, you can begin laying the groundwork for these things with Smuggle promotions. Yeah. You can tell just simple stories. And we know that video shot on phones are preferred right now. You don't need to take out the camera. Just take out your phone and record directly within Instagram, directly within TikTok, directly within Facebook, whatever it might be. And just start telling the story of like how you're preparing for this type of thing. Because think about when you go somewhere. If you go to see a concert, and you've never heard the band before. And now think about going to see a concert and you know the words to every single one of their songs. When you are primed, you're already going to experience that thing and be bought in so much more. That translates to something like getting more volunteers, getting more small groups enrollment, getting early kids sign up so you know the numbers so you can prepare for VBS. All of these things can be done. And a Smuggle promotion, this Beehive one is the best example that I've seen from a church. It can be reproduced in any context indefinitely using existing rhythms in your church, low effort design tools. It's your phone.
Yeah. Okay, before we get on to the low effort design tools, because I know that's what people are really here for, one free tip. That story in particular, the Beehive post, I had someone in our community respond in a DM to that story, be like, yeah, the bees are cool, but how did you make that video look so like crisp? And the simple free tip is that I didn't use my front facing camera. I used my back facing camera. And sometimes I'm prone to film on like 0.5 magnification on my back facing camera, you get that wide angle look. But I was outside, the light was good, and I chose to do just a regular camera, like the 1X. And it's tight enough where I've got some depth of field, but it's not too tight where I can't hold it out here and it captures the whole image.
Did you have problems keeping yourself center at all on 1X?
I didn't. Maybe just because I have practice with it.
0.5, you can't mess up. Like
right.
It's so wide, you're always going to be in frame.
Yeah, and so that was enough for her to be like, "Wow, this looks awesome," but it didn't look like I filmed it with a C500 Mark II or something.
Right, which we've talked about. You get too polished, too produced,
Yep.
and suddenly people don't feel like you're telling a story. They're like, what are they selling me here?
Yeah.
Unless, of course, your audience is entirely creatives. People ask, Brady, well, why are you not following your advice? Because all of my audience is creatives, and they want to be like, whoa, look, he put the text behind his head. Like,
Okay, 3 low effort design tools. And I mean like really low effort. The first we've talked about already is Canva. So this is for still images. When you get into Canva, if you've never used Canva before, first of all, it's free. It's mostly free. They have a pro plan, but I've never paid for it. So anything you see on my church, it's all Canva free. And I use it for social posts. I actually already mentioned I used it for the Advent devotional as well. You can design pretty much anything in Canva. Like they have a lot of templates for a lot of stuff. There's even some video stuff you can do in there as well. But when I go to Canva, I'm clicking on Instagram post vertical, And because I have used some templates before, when I open that, it's going to show me a bunch of templates that it thinks I already like. And surprise, surprise, it's right most of the time. And so when I first started using Canva, I found a few templates that I did like. And once you start like making one, it gets the signals. It's like, we're going to show this person more templates like this. And so my Instagram page has an aesthetic. Not all of the posts are the same template, but it has an aesthetic that feels congruent. And that's just Canva doing the work of like recommending me new templates. I'm not going out of my way to choose something that looks good on the grid. It's just Canva knows that I like this type of design. It's serving me new templates and I'm using them and the grid ends up looking great. So the templates are cool because you can edit them. It's all web-based, right? So you edit it right in your browser, just like you would in Photoshop or even a photo editor that's more like elementary than that. And you can duplicate pages. Everything is saved automatically, so I can go back. And if I really liked a template and the way I customized it, I can just go back. And if I'm using my account, it's all there. So I can just swap in a new sermon quote or swap in a new quote post or a new scripture, a new image, and export it again as a PNG. And now I've got a new post that is built off the same template from another post. So I'm maintaining that like design aesthetic. So Canva is powering 99% of our static posts on Instagram. Sometimes if I'm trying to do something a little bit more specialized, I'll go to Photoshop and just do it because I know what I want to do. But for the most part, I have the content, which is the sermon quote, the scripture verse, the callback to something that happened in our service, a guided prayer. I have the content already. I'm just going to Canva. I'm clicking on Instagram post and I'm looking through a bunch of templates till I find one that I like. I put in the content. I click download. I airdrop it to my phone. Actually, I don't airdrop it to my phone. I'm using, you're going to hate this. I'm using the Meta Business Suite and I'm scheduling a post because these moments of inspiration happen at sometimes inopportune times. So sometimes I'll have a little bit of bandwidth at like 8 p.m. And I'm ready. I have some creative energy to design that post, but 8 p.m. is not the right time. So I'll design it, I'll download it, and I'll schedule it for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Or, sometimes it's mid-afternoon. I can do this post in Canva for 30 seconds. So I can literally do it at work. It's not going to take away from my work. Boom, designed. I'll schedule it for 2 days from now. Or I'll schedule it for next week because I've already posted this week and I need to take no weeks off. So I don't need to double up this week. Maybe next week I look at my calendar, I'm away. I'm going to schedule that for next week. That's kind of putting it in the bank, right? So that's for still stuff. For video posts, I've been using CapCut, and this is thanks to you. We've been doing this a little bit at work. We're working with churches and we've been leveraging CapCut and their templates, again, their video templates, to create these really awesome videos, often like recap videos, Sunday service recap videos that are stylized, that are set to music, they're synced up to music. And again, you can make a video post like this from a template in CapCut in 30 seconds, 60 seconds by simply clicking on the template you like. Again, this is free. Template you like, adding the photos that you took from the church picnic last week and playing it to watch it back, clicking download, and posting to Instagram. So this is the strategy we're using for short form video because we know that Reels on Instagram and Facebook are really important to a successful social strategy. But here's what's unique about our church that I know is not unique for a lot of our audience. We don't record our Sunday services. So we can't actually put into practice the strategy that we talk about on the show all the time, which is, you already have this video, grab the hook, chop it up, post it. Well, we don't have that. And so what we've been doing is making short form videos either out of still images on CapCut or a couple weeks ago we had a picnic. I knew that I was going to have to make this post. So I took out my phone again, it's in my pocket, for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I filmed a couple quick clips of us having a picnic. I put my phone away and continued to picnic with our friends. I'm not sure anyone noticed I was filming them. And then by Sunday afternoon, I had gone into CapCut, chosen a template, just uploaded those videos, downloaded, and posted. Sunday recap, just like that. And that was because we had just done this promotion of like, hey, we want to get picnic tables. We need your help. Will you share what you have with us? And can we pool some money together to buy these picnic tables? We got the picnic tables, and our community deserves to see the fruit of their gifts, whether they stayed for the picnic or not. And so it was really important that I document that quickly, post it quickly. All in all, that post probably took me 5 to 10 minutes between filming, selecting the template, editing, and posting. And now we have this like this celebratory piece of content that everyone gets to share online, regardless of if they were there in the moment or not.
Another tip for CapCut is it also is able to use live photos.
Yeah.
Which are basically, in the templates, you would not be able to distinguish them from videos.
Yeah.
And so it's always just best practice. Like if you're just taking photos, and I would encourage every church to do this as a supplement to if you already have photographers like taking really high quality photos, is just be snapping live photos because those live photos, once they're integrated into the CapCut templates, look like you have all this video footage, but you don't. They were just live photos. So that's a huge win also. And the other thing I wanted to emphasize here is that, Alex is describing this new rhythm that he's found himself in, and he's still pretty early into it. Mm-hmm. Social is one of those things that you can really only learn in the trenches. You can read about it, you can see other people doing it, but then you do it yourself. When I spoke at the conference this weekend, you know what analogy I used? I was like, look, you can read about baking bread, but until you get your hands in that dough and you feel the hydration levels,
that's right.
How do I describe to you the hydration level?
You can't.
You got to feel it, and you only can do that by being in the trenches of the yeast. And the same thing is true with social. The more that you do it, the more you'll develop that muscle. I promise you, it is going to feel weird at first. You're going to be like, oh, we're taking photos in a place we normally don't.
Yeah.
I'm filming myself in a way that I never would. I'm using Instagram's interface, and it's very different from an interface that I'm familiar with. Sometimes we see this with actual professionals. Like I'm used to using the Pro Tools, and now you want me to use these dumbed down tools, which I actually don't know how to use. It's like I'm a beginner, which is kind of embarrassing because I shouldn't be a beginner. That is all normal. Everyone feels it. You got to push through it. Favorite thing that my friend Sean ever said is your first videos are your worst videos. And the same is true for any social post. Your first posts are going to be your worst posts. How do you avoid that? You can't. You have to go through it.
Yep.
And so the more you do it, the more you become comfortable. The more you remember, oh, I should take note of that idea right now. I'm not really in the practice of taking notes of my ideas because I'd never done it before. I just let my ideas kind of go, but now they're more valuable. I need to write them down. Oh, I'm going to hold my phone in a slightly different way because the first time I did it, I realized I wasn't perfectly in the frame. I'm going to change from 1x to 0.5x. All these things you can only learn by doing. And so we encourage you to just do. And that's why what Alex is talking about right now, Reverend Rural, is so valuable because it's low effort creation tools, and it's repurposing stuff you've already done. Yeah. So we're trying to remove every single burden, every single hurdle, so that you can begin actually doing, because the real gems that you're going to discover are once you're actually doing the stuff.
Yes. One more low effort design tool. Now this is a tool actually that we make here at Nucleus, but our church is a personal user of it, so I get to talk about it this way, as Nucleus Media. So Nucleus Media is a product of ours. There's stock video, there's worship backgrounds and countdowns, but there's a daily done for you social media pack. And most of those posts are static image posts, and they're all designed for spiritual formation and such. But every week there's one short form video, and they are catered towards spiritual formation. Some of my favorite posts that we design and that we send to our users. And so I use these again because we're not recording our sermons and posting them to supplement our Reels kind of quota. And so I'll download a Nucleus Media video, and I'll post that if I haven't posted a video in a while. And so I want to show a few examples of some of these posts that we've done at our church if we've got time. And one of those posts happens. The last one is a Nucleus Media one, so you can see it there. So let's start with this one. This is an example of a sermon quote, and you'll notice that it is a carousel. We've talked about this on the show a lot. In your social strategy on the Brady Shearer Instagram page, carousels have really been going off for you. And that's been my experience as well. I love a carousel for a few different reasons. One, it's a bit of an algorithm hack because you give your post more than one opportunity to show up in somebody's feed. So I'm not sure if you've experienced this, but you'll be scrolling through your feed, you'll see, I'll use you as an example. I'll see one of your carousel posts, but I won't engage with it because I'm a friend with you in real life and not online, so I'm not liking or commenting or whatever. I close the app. I go back later on that afternoon, I'm scrolling through my feed again.
Another one.
I see the same post, but it's another slide. So it's kind of Instagram saying okay, we know that you're friends with this person because of how you DM them or your history, and you scrolled past this post. And we think you might have done that by accident. We think you might like this. And so they show it to you again, but they don't show you the first slide. They show you the second slide.
And that's really key. And I know this.
Yeah.
So what I'll actually do is when I write carousels, the first carousel has a big hook. And I'll open, let's just go through some of mine as like
Yes.
real examples. So this is my last carousel post. So right now it has 3,390 likes. And the slide 1 reads this: my most unpopular social media opinion. So let's imagine you log into Instagram and you see that. And you go, oh, wow, okay, I'm compelled. And you swipe through to see the rest on the carousel. Not swipe away, swipe through.
Yeah.
Let's imagine you log on and you're Alex, you're like, not again.
Not this man again.
I spent all day with him. I don't want to see him on my feed as well. And you scroll by. You don't scroll through. But then you open it up later again at night and you see the second slide, which reads, this might be my most spicy take. It really shouldn't be, though. All right, here it is.
Yeah, so you didn't give it to them on the second.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
So when I design my carousels, the first slide is a hook. The second slide is a hook.
Mini hook.
And that way, if you did it the first time, you stop scrolling and you engaged, it's fine. You keep going. But I don't give it away on the second. So I'm basically getting 2 chances to hook you.
Yeah. That's clever.
See, I don't usually talk about these things.
This is an advanced strategy that I haven't been employing yet.
But because you're talking, I don't have to do kind of like the top level content. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, what about a callback? What about a double hook? Brady this whole time has been teaching us about hooks. You don't know about the double hook. This is like fishing. I've got like some crazy like fishing rod reel. It's a double hook. Is there something there? You're a fisher. Like, do they have like ones that are like, oh, you could hook once, but you hook twice?
Absolutely.
And the double hook.
Wow. So, wow, I really need to reevaluate my social strategy when it comes to carousels. But no, I posted this carousel. I taught on prayer just the other week. And so like the thesis of my sermon is like the purpose of prayer is to be properly formed, which is a good standalone, shareable post. It's good enough on its own. But there is an expansion to that thought because it's not a controversial thought, but it's like, it's a bit of an odd take because sometimes we think of prayer, it's like, no, the purpose of prayer is like to ask God for things that I need. And so it deserves some expanding. And so to swipe over, that's where I put the development of that thought on the second post of the carousel. And so I'm employing this technique all the time for sermon quotes.
Right. So for those listening that can't see it, it's a 2-slide carousel.
Yeah.
Slide 1 is big text, like pithy quote.
A la Brady Shearer. Like, big text, can't miss it.
And then the second one is much smaller text and it's way more dense as a elaboration on the quote.
That's right.
Which is a really interesting way of taking that kind of standard, historic, traditional quote post and making it something a little bit more timely, but also providing more context. And so this actually affords you the ability to get a bit spicier with the quotes.
Yes.
The problem with quotes typically is they're so compact that it's easy to misinterpret them.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we're working with churches, they're like, oh, well, that's not technically, that's not entirely true. That could be misinterpreted. You give yourself more freedom if you have that second slide where you're like, okay, let me elaborate on what I fully mean by here so that you can get the truth in this and not misinterpret it.
Yeah, and you'll notice the caption on this post is just simply pray prayers like this with the little finger pointing to basically say like swipe to read what kind of prayers we're talking about.
Got it.
And that's intentional because I've noticed that the Instagram like app interface is kind of deprioritizing expanding the caption. If you've ever tried to expand the caption on a reel, I don't know if it's just me and like my big dumb thumbs.
Thank you.
You just can never click the right area
Okay.
to expand the reel.
No, you gotta let me talk about this. Okay, let me tell you. So, oh no, I'm so glad you experienced this. I love this seat. Can you do next week's episode too? This is great. I just show up and talk. Oh, this is what I did with my bread the other day. So
I know you're about to talk about a bread post there where you had to expand the caption to read the recipe.
basically, one of our meals in the family, meal schedule is called Greek Goddess. Mm-hmm. And it's this really cool like Greek fries take where you bake some potatoes, you bake some chicken, and you throw in some like, dill salad, nice tzatziki, and throw it on a bowl. Like it's all saucy. It's great. I found it on Instagram. And the Instagram reel caption has the temperature for the meal. And I've committed it to memory, but I hadn't cooked Greek Goddess in a little while.
Okay.
It's 400 degrees for 20 minutes and then 425 for 25 minutes. And I know there's a change. And every time I go in, I have to click. This has happened to me a dozen times on this one post because I have it linked in my Google Doc where our family's menu is in. I click there and I click more. And I can tell you the number of times that Brittany has been like, what's wrong? Because I've tried it 6 times and I just start yelling at my phone like, let me look at the thing.
Yes.
And she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, How do you explain that to somebody?
Yes, I know.
So I'm so glad you said
Just
it.
trying to expand the caption.
And
I experienced this a lot this past week because I bought a Ninja Creamy. So I'm furiously on Reels, like show me
you're
creamy
creaming.
recipes.
Yep.
And you know, like all of these people who are posting their Reels be like, this is the best vanilla base ever. So I'm reading the text. I'm like, okay, tell me. And it's like, read the caption. It's like, I would love to expand the caption, but I can't. So
But I sent you didn't have to expand my caption.
yes. No, you sent me, you laid it out
Have
for
you
me.
found a good vanilla base?
Yes, totally. And I used vanilla coconut yogurt because we
Yeah.
actually always have that in the fridge.
Because I figured you didn't want to use like the
Jell-O
zero
or-
sugar
yeah.
Jell-O powder or
Yeah.
like, I got some xanthan gum.
Yeah, so I used, okay, we are really departing now, but here it is because people in the DMs ask me, whole milk or almond milk, doesn't matter. Vanilla coconut yogurt, we always have that in the fridge.
Yeah.
Vanilla,
What fat percentage is that?
no idea. I don't pay attention
But
to stuff like that.
is it like pretty fatty?
It feels that way, yeah.
Yeah, it's just funny how you can like swap whole milk for almond milk because like
Yeah.
almond milk is water and whole milk
I
is
know.
basically like sludge.
Yeah. Vanilla extract,
Yeah.
which we make at home,
Oh.
and a little bit of maple syrup for the sweetener.
And it's turning out good.
It turned out great. It definitely is not like, but it's like any healthy alternative. It doesn't taste like, oh, this is just like the vanilla ice cream from my childhood. This is just like Chapman's. No, it tastes like healthy vanilla ice cream.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
send that to me. I might want to try that because like mine was like intense.
Yeah.
Like oh no, the problem is the lactose. I guess I could swap the whole milk for the almond milk and then go
Yeah.
with the coconut yogurt. That would work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just have one more hot take on
Yes.
food? This is not really okay. I was gonna say this about restaurants.
Yeah.
If you don't take reservations, what are we doing? I want to know if like I'm crazy on this because there are some restaurants that are like we don't do reservations as like a personality trait.
Right.
Like why is this your personality?
Yeah, I know. I can think of one coming to my mind, and it is a little bit annoying because you really want to go there. And
do.
If you have kids, you have to plan for childcare. What happens if you roll the dice, you go and there's nowhere to sit?
Well, forget about kids. What if I go and I can't get in? I'm like
Yeah.
waiting outside for like an hour. I got to
Yeah.
see a movie or I got
Exactly.
plans after
Yeah.
this. Like, surely the people that work in hospitality are listening and they're like, well, the reason we don't do reservations is because X percentage of people don't show up. And we found that we can actually fill the tables more if we don't have reservations. Okay, what generation has enough time to just not plan things? Who are the people?
Right.
I'm blaming older people, but maybe I'm just the planning type. Let's just show up and we'll see if it.
No.
I don't live in the city. It's not like, oh, this Vietnamese
Right.
place is full. I'll go to this beautiful other restaurant next door. There's 3 restaurants.
Yeah.
And none of them take reservations. What am I doing? Am I crazy?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Okay, so that was a carousel for a sermon quote. Big text on the first slide, small, clear, concise quote, expand the thought on the second slide.
Yep.
This next one is also a carousel. Keep in mind, these are all designed with Canva. Very, very low effort design for me. This one is an example of like, I mean, a lot of the posts we post have spiritual formation in mind, but this one is like really spiritually formative. So this is a guided prayer. We do a lot of guided prayer in our church, and I write a lot of them. We pray a lot of prayers like from other people and like from church history, but I also like to write prayers for our community and for our moment. So it was Pentecost a handful of weeks ago. So I wrote this like a guided prayer. And this is an effort to like combat the really lame caption interface. Is like, okay, this prayer ended up being 3 slides. And truthfully, like it's kind of like a poem. So the formatting is kind of important to me. And so I wanted to design it. I wanted to put the text on the image.
It wouldn't translate in the caption.
It wouldn't translate in the caption and it wouldn't translate on one single image. So this is another example of like, okay, I've got a bigger piece of content. It matters. This is spiritually formative. And so I made a carousel post out of it. Like I said, if I'm posting a still like image to Instagram, I'm making my best effort to make it a carousel. Sometimes they're just standalone posts and they're one slide, but if I can make it a carousel, I'm gonna make it a carousel.
A great design tip for carousels is if you take what could fit on one slide and put it on 10 slides, it will almost always perform better.
Yeah.
There's something about like, if I can build up momentum scrolling through your post, it's like one sentence. And every time I say one sentence, I'm getting to swipe. That actually creates momentum to the point where you're more likely to complete that post, which is a huge positive signal relative to you hit one of those like dense slides and you're like, man, and this is something I noticed with my own content back in the day. I would try to put too much on a slide and I could tell like people were not getting through it because they'd hit this dense slide and be like, well, if I can't get past this slide, it's like when you watch one Marvel show, it's like, I can't enjoy this other one. Like, I'm not going to keep going. I'm going to abandon it. And so slides with very little amount of text, huge win.
Yes. Okay, 3 more posts, and I'm gonna reveal it here. Like the next 3 are all videos. And I did that intentionally because we really do believe that short form video is key to a successful social strategy in the way that these apps are prioritizing short form videos. And so I've got 3 examples here, and they're 3 pretty unique examples. So the first one, I believe, is the story about the bees. And so we've talked about this now on this show and a previous show, but I wanted to show it. You can see, if you're watching this video, how I'm using the 1X camera on my phone and how I'm getting, especially in that first clip, you can see a little bit of depth of field. Now I'm on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Like it's a flagship phone. It's a nice phone with a nice camera. But that's kind of the effect that you're getting. And it's a short story. I was out there, waist deep in long grass. I didn't script it. I had just finished meeting the beekeeper. So I told the story to the camera the way I would tell the story to a friend on the phone. And it translated into being the best best performing social post we've ever made. Later on in the video, you'll actually see that I do switch to the 0.5 camera. That's just a bit of a pattern interrupt method that is not really important for you. You can take that tip if you want it. And take note of the cover there. So if you're on Instagram or if you're watching on YouTube, I designed that reel cover in Canva. And that's important because if you're creating a really nice Instagram aesthetic, not like a uniform grid, but a nice aesthetic, and I post this story, which is a good story, but it's just a screen grab from the video, it's going to interrupt the aesthetic and not feel cohesive. Mm-hmm. So I just went into Canva and I quickly designed a cover for that reel, which I'll continue to use going forward. I'll use this for stories like this. I'll probably use that template that I created in Canva to maintain that feel on our grid. So let's go to the next one. It's another short form video, and it's an example of what I talked about. A video I made using CapCut. This is actually a template that you sent me, and this is the aforementioned picnic. So this is our first picnic with the picnic tables. I took my phone out for probably 2, 3, 4 minutes. I shot 10, 20 clips. This video I think is about 8 seconds long. It has room for about 8 videos. So I knew I liked the template. I opened CapCut. I selected the videos that I wanted to put in there. I didn't make one single edit. I liked the way it looked. I downloaded it and I posted it a couple hours after our Sunday service. So that's just like a real life example of how quickly you can turn around a piece of high quality content. If you just have your little antenna up knowing that, this is the first Sunday with the picnic tables. I should film a little bit of this. I don't need to go get my camera. Got my phone in my pocket. Just take a couple videos. I used, what's it called? Cinematic mode on my camera for a couple of those clips. Give it a little bit more of like a cinematic feel. Use CapCut, free app, template. I didn't have to come up with a design. And that's a really high quality piece of like celebratory content that I had to work very little for.
And it can feel weird sometimes, like, I got to get my camera. I got to put the lens on. Suddenly people are feeling a bit uptight, like intense what you're doing. Like just take the photo with the phone. Like
everyone's conditioned to that.
Right. That's not a weird thing at all. No one is like, why are you taking your phone out right now and taking like pictures of this nice picnic?
Yes.
No, like that's expected. And so now you also have that freedom. That's one other element that we maybe don't talk enough about how challenging it can be. Low effort design tools, yes. So reclaiming your time, repurposing stuff you've already done, yes, reclaiming your time. Also just like the awkwardness of like, this doesn't feel like the right time and place.
Yeah.
And then you're like, man, it would have been great if we could highlight that, but I just didn't have my gear, or it just didn't feel like appropriate to take. Sometimes we talk about this when we're developing content. It's like, well, are we going to bring our camera there? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, if you can shoot ProRes now on an iPhone. Yeah. The other day I was watching this video from this creator that I really admire, his creative style of making videos, and his color grading is outstanding. And I know he shoots with high quality cameras. And he was doing this like tour of this hotel room. He was like proposing to his girlfriend. It was this big like deal. And he's like, this is the hotel room we got. And I'm like, wow, this is indoors. Like the color grading here is top notch. And then I see a reflection of him in the mirror.
He's shooting on his iPhone.
And I was like, no, this is wrong. I had crazy. A bit of a, like, I had to like sit down and collect myself and my thoughts. And I'm like, maybe he must be using the 15. You have the 15?
Yeah.
Is the 16 out or is the 16
No.
coming out? You have the 15. So the 15 Pro Max can shoot ProRes.
Yeah, you just have to plug in like an SSD to it.
Mine can't shoot ProRes. I'm living over here in, the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And I was like, is he shooting?
It's crazy.
He was shooting with like a $5,000 camera and then this, and I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell.
Right.
I'm still processing it.
Yeah, it's wild. We had a baby dedication this weekend. It was our baby. So that's part of the reason that I didn't post about it. But I'll tell you, between the end of that service and the end of that day, I was involved in like a handful of like new group texts, which were just people sending us photos of our dedication because they took their phone out to take photos.
And you could reuse those photos because, who's going to give release for this child?
Right.
Me. It's my child.
Exactly. But like the same, so we didn't make a post about it because it was just his dedication, but I could have taken all those photos, put them in a CapCut template, export it, boom, dedication post. Or the next time we do a baptism, because that happens all the time when we do baptisms, people just send us all the pictures like to the phone. It's like, okay, so I've got my baptism, because a lot of us, we've talked about believing lies a couple times today. Like a lot of us believe this lie that like, oh, my church, like it's this little church. We don't have the video gear. I don't have the 15 Pro, so I don't know how to shoot in ProRes.
That's right. That should be a reason not to do it because I feel like I now have to get that phone. I'm right there with you people.
No, it's like I can't shoot in 120 frames, so I can't get like that slow motion baptismal shot like Elevation Church gets. So like, I'm just not going to post anything. It's like, that's not your church. You don't have to. The people who are following you don't care. They just want to relive that moment. And so when you get flooded with text after baptism of the photos that everyone took on their phone, like put them in CapCut, export it, and post it. Like that's all there is to it. So yeah, you can tell that like this has really unlocked something for me. Just like these free tools empowering me to reclaim, like you said, all that design time, like production time. I don't have to do that. People are, I'm making the content, my dad's making the content, people are sending us photos, they're making the content. All I have to do is like put it in the app and ship it. Like that's easy enough. Let me show you the easiest one. This is the last one, last example. This is a Nucleus Media social post. We taught on prayer, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and there was a Nucleus social media post. You can search in Nucleus Media for like, you can search for any term. Just search prayer, search video, search whatever you want. And there's a short form video for prayer. Why? Let me reload it so it actually plays. Why do we pray for each other? And right on the screen it says, it embodies us, it empowers us, it encourages us. It's like a 4-second video. It's designed to loop. It comes with the backing track. I'm pretty sure the footage we shot in Alberta.
Yeah, I shot that.
Yeah. So I wanted to highlight this post for 2 reasons. One, it's Nucleus Media, so I didn't have to do anything. I downloaded it and I posted it. And it was within the context of what we were doing in our community. We're talking about and teaching about prayer. So this is spiritually formative for us in this moment. But I want to share the insights. This is our second most popular post we've ever posted. And we talk about this on the show a lot, how short form videos specifically have this potential for dramatic reach on social media. And so it didn't hit 1 million views. Okay. It's not like,
Did Joe Jonas like it?
nope, but Joe Jonas liked my post the other day. So
See, that's what he failed to mention. Oh, I'm just this pastor, the small church. As if he's not this internationally known, running in the circles with the Jonas Brothers.
It was weird, man. It was like I opened Instagram and had some notifications, so I just click on the thing, and it's like I see the verified tag, which anyone can have now.
Yeah, now they have the priority notifications, like, the special people like
but it's
your
right on
stuff.
top of it. It's like Joe Jonas liked your post, verification badge. So I click because Mitch was like, "You sure that was him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Mitch." I clicked on his profile. He's got 13 million followers. Like that's the Joe Jonas. Back to this post.
So when he's not reaching people for spiritual formation, he's reaching pop stars with coffee memes.
Content. So it's got 500 plays, whatever, 40 likes. That's a viral for us post.
Yes.
That's like 8 times what our posts usually get. Okay. But it's the reach. 93.4% of them are non-followers. So this is the opportunity. It's like, yes, this post is contextual to what we're doing in our church. We're talking about prayer, and it likely reached some of our followers, but it also is an encouraging, standalone, valuable piece of Christian content that reached over 90% of the folks that it reached, non-followers.
And the last 3 videos that Alex mentioned, I recognized all three of them because I had seen them in my Instagram feed.
There you go.
Those carousel ones, I did not recognize them. I do not think I saw them, which is interesting.
Yeah, I actually lied. It's the third most popular. The picnic post that we just showed, 565 views, so a few more views, less likes, less shares, 78% non-followers. And so that one reached more followers. And that's interesting because there were people in our church community so it has more views and a larger percentage of that is followers, which means more of our church community saw that. And that's plausible because it's our church community in that video.
Yep.
Let's just go to the bees just for fun. That one has almost 900 views.
Including all three Jonas Brothers.
Yes, and 75% non-followers.
So you talked about No Weeks Off, the base level of the social ministry mountain.
Yes.
From there, we go to viral for me posts.
Which we've had.
The more of those that you stockpile, the sooner you can go to the third layer.
They've all been short form videos, which is worthy of note.
Right, exactly. And what's interesting to note on my end is that I had my first viral for me post that was a carousel post. And we talked about this, I feel like a couple weeks ago. It's at like 20,000 likes on a carousel post.
Yeah.
And it is disproportionately reaching non-followers. And so that's kind of curious because like my reels have started to like drop down with their virality and my carousels are like creeping up. And that might be audience specific. That might be, who knows? This is why repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test.
That's right.
And so I'm starting to kind of, we've created some inventory in our catalog or our calendar for new types of reels. So are we getting a bit stale or am I not being like a little bit provocative enough? We did a post today where I'm like, this is the most irritating thing because I am very irritated by it. It is not untrue. And that post like resonated a lot more because it had like a little bit of a negative hook leading in and then it was very wholesome after that. So just the importance again of being in the trenches.
Yeah. So that's our social strategy. I think it is setting this little rural church up for not just success, but like sustainability. And that hinges on those two things, which is like leveraging high quality content that already exists. So I'm not working to come up with, I'm not looking at my cursor every morning, like, what am I going to post today? Like the high quality content already exists in the form of sermons, scripture references, things that are happening in our community, stuff that we're doing, and then really taking advantage of these low effort design tools that, I mean, they're better than they ever have been, right? Like Canva, it's bewildering that Canva is free or free to the extent that it is. CapCut, I'm just getting familiar with now because we're employing like some short form videos in our strategy and that's been super useful for us. And then of course tools like Nucleus Media, but I really do think, and I know it's still in its infancy. That was part of my message to you. And I said, hey, I think this episode might be fruitful, but I just want to like, I think I'm a little like young in this. Like I haven't been at this for too long. Like maybe want to delay this for longer. But I actually do believe that this strategy is sustainable. So it's not a worry that you have or a worry that I have either. So this is working for us. I envision it continuing to work for as long as we need it to work. And I know a lot of the churches that we work with here at Nucleus and Pro Church Tools and churches that I talk to like one-on-one, churches that are part of the live classes we're doing, like they're in the same boat, which is like we're overworked, we're understaffed, we don't have enough resources, there's only a handful of us meeting. Like, how could we find the time, the bandwidth, the creativity to do this? And I think this is the way.
You said that I've set up a social strategy that I believe is successful and sustainable. Thing is that those actually belong inverted. You can't see success online unless you first have an approach that is sustainable. The word that Alex actually used when he wrote me about this episode was profitable. And I thought it was the perfect word because for someone who's in the trenches of ministry, surely he was going to share some tools and resources that were going to be profitable to so many people listening. I'm confident they are. We're thankful for your time, attention, and trust. And we'll talk to you next Wednesday. All right.